7 o'clock. This is Morning Express. In case you're joining us now, welcome aboard. And well, today is Labor Day, and we take this opportunity to wish you a happy Labor Day. Now, what's making headlines on this Labor Day? That's what we're going to be checking out right now. And joining me in studio to do that is Deki Omukoba. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And happy Labor Day to you as well.
You too, thanks.
Okay. And one of the questions we are asking is what there is to celebrate as a laborer or a worker in Kenya. Do you have something you'd like to point out and say, this is what I celebrate as a worker in Kenya?
I think for me, it is the difference that I get to make out there in the field that I'm in every time that I go, and especially for me, it's with my students. All the time when I see them succeed and move on and pursue their dreams, it's something that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And I'm very grateful that I am part of their journey.
Absolutely. Well, that's Labor Day for you, and I don't know what you celebrate on Labor Day, but that's a question that we're posing to you, and we'd like to hear what you have to say. But let's first of all take a look at what's making headlines on the dailies. And as usual, we're going to start off with The Standard, where there is a headline, 150 billion worth of food going to waste. Quite a shocking amount of food going to waste, and especially given that we've experienced drought quite a number of times, but only to see that other than just having areas that are not productive in terms of agriculture, even those that are productive, there are some that are actually wasting the food, and 150 billion worth of food is a lot.
Going to waste, as you say, considering the fact that there are parts of this country where we don't get to experience this much of a supply. I think that what needs to happen is that we need to be able to enhance and strategize in such a way that we identify some of these farmers that have a lot of produce, but they do not have the market for their produce, or they do not have the revenue to be able to move their produce from one point to another, so that we can be able, to have an equal distribution of the abundance that is there in this country. So I think that, with time, that the government and those who are in charge of agriculture, we should be able to, go out and be able to identify some of these places.
All right, and 150 billion worth of food going to waste is a lot. And yes, some of it, if I'm just to give you snippets of what might be happening, is some of it is lost during storage. There is also a lot of maize that is lost through aflatoxin, which is basically just food poisoning. You've also got some that is lost during transportation, and the amount being put at around 150 billion worth of food wasted. So there you go. That's what's on the headlines. But also, another story that's on the front page of The Standard is Raila Party to back Uhuru growth pillars. And this is on page 7. So if we can just flip there. But it looks like ODM, Orange Democratic Movement, is now working in what possibly the president had mentioned earlier, saying that let us put politics aside, let us put politicking behind us, and let us work together to ensure that we have development. Now, we do know that Jubilee has got the 4-pillar agenda, which they have put forward, but it looks like now ODM is saying, look, according to this article, the 4-pillar agenda is basically what is also part of what they have in their manifesto. So it does work for Kenyans, for them to support Jubilee in this one.
Yeah, I think that after the handshake, between Honorable Raila and the president, that this was expected, that then they would come together and find a way to be able to work and advance some of these things. And they have constantly said that this is not about politics, this is about moving the country forward. And so I think that this is a very strategic move for both sides, of the divide, to come together and to continue to reinforce the narrative that we are coming together for the benefit of the nation and for the benefit of Kenyans as a whole, and that is something that we want to see. And I think that, even though that there is a lot of politics around what is going on, it will take time for, us as citizens and other people, especially in the political side, to be able to understand, what these two have together in terms, of the agenda that they have in mind that they want to push forward.
Absolutely. And, well, we'll wait and see how that pans out. The other thing, of course, that is developing is the list of 14 members that were put before as those who are going to negotiate and ensure that something takes place after the handshake. Of course, what has surrounded the handshake is what some would term as mystery, and that is in regards to the content of that particular handshake. Hopefully, this 14-member team is going to come out and give what we'd call framework and a structure which one can follow. Of course, there's been questions being asked, what is the agreement between the two of them? And of course, I've seen also the likes of Barack Muluka from ANC basically saying that we cannot say whether it's inclusive or not inclusive by virtue of the fact that we don't know what they're supposed to be negotiating, so we cannot even comment much in regards to the list, because of course it has drawn different reactions from different people as to the constitution of that particular list.
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue that most people have is the fact that it is not an open book as to what, is on the table between the president and Raila Odinga. And that becomes very problematic, because even as people want to speak around it, it's very difficult for us to speak around it when we are not privy to what is going on. And so the constitution and the coming together of this team hopefully is able to bring some things and shed some light as to what is behind the handshake and some of the things that they want to push forward. And then from there, maybe, the rest of us can have a better framework to contribute, in terms of opinions and what we have to say with regards to this handshake.
Okay, and well, we'll wait and see how that is going to pan out. But now, there's never a dull day in Kenya, especially when it comes to politics. Page 3 of the Standard, ex-lobby leader beaten up for criticizing Sonko. Now, this was rather dramatic, and I think we saw the story earlier on, and it was just one of those incidences which one is left wondering what was going on. We have the former Nairobi Central Business District Association chairman, Timothy Muriuki, basically had called for a press conference, and he was criticizing the governor for Nairobi, Mike Sonko, but he never even got to read his address before he was attacked and basically ruffled and taken away from the cameras.
This is definitely in-house matters, when it comes to the county government, because if he had not even begun reading his particular press release and there were people already coming in to whisk him out of that particular area, it shows that there is a lot of in-house, that is going on, in-house wrangles and in-house chaos that are going on. And probably, the fear that if some of these things are brought to the light, then it's going to be problematic. I think that this is something that the county government needs to address from the top leadership, whatever is going on. And there has been a lot of calls, towards Kenyans or Nairobians, but in particular, coming to the point that they appreciate, the county government and some of the things that they are doing. So I think that if they advance the agenda and if things are very clear as to the advancement that the county government is doing, then some of these things, will not see some of these things. But at the same time, I think that, this kind of brutality should not be allowed.
Absolutely. And well, that's a story that you want to read and find out what was going on. As you can see from the pictures on your screens right now, it was rather dramatic. But let's move on to page 8, where, again, we are counting the cost and continue to count the cost of the floods. There just seems to be a let-up of the rain the last maybe few hours. It didn't, at least in Nairobi, it didn't rain last night, at least where I was, because nowadays, again, it rains in some areas and others it doesn't, even when you're in the same city. But there you go. Heavy rains disrupt schools reopening for second term. But again, something that needs to be put into sharp focus as to how we deal with acts of God, and especially one like rain, which we had been warned about. We had been told that there's a likelihood of having heavy rains, but I guess we sat on our leaves waiting, and here we are now counting the cost.
I think, as you say, some of these challenges that we have faced, and the weatherman has said very clearly that the amounts of rain that we have received this year is, unusually normal, not as the normal that we have been receiving in yesteryears. And so, as you say, that there was need for us to be prepared. But some of these things which, are beyond our control sometimes are difficult to deal with. We have seen some of these places that have been heavily flooded, and of course the consequences thereof, especially as the students go back to school this coming week. So it's going to be, a bit of a challenge where that is concerned. But, moving forward, I think that as a nation, we should be able to devise some of the ways to deal with some of these things, especially in moving people, from some of these areas that are prone to flooding.
All right, and well, page 14 of the Standard, we have the cartoon there, and it's basically highlighting Labor Day. And if we can just have that on the screen, workers of the world unite. But you can see Kotu there with a huge machine. It's probably a collection machine and is collecting money from workers. But the worker, as usual, is the most disadvantaged. And on Labor Day, of course, we're expecting to hear what the government has in store for the laborer, for the worker of Kenya. And right here on KTN News, we're going to be covering that live and bringing you updates of what is happening at Uhuru Park. In fact, not too long from now, we should be able to give you some few updates of the preparations that are happening at Uhuru Park. But there you go. That's the picture and the cartoon's eye of what the laborer in Kenya has to work. And Kotu basically purporting to represent the worker, but seems to be collecting, but not doing much for the worker.
It's true. There are very many challenges, that workers do face, in the daily duties of their assignment. Part of them is remuneration, the health hazard that they have to face and the challenges that they do. So these are things that, hopefully organizations, like Kotu is supposed to be able to front, and deal with. But there are definitely very, very many challenges that workers and laborers do face as they move on with their duties.
All right, and we finish off with the Daily Nation, where the headlines is How Crooks Steal from Your Phone. And this is basically just fraud that takes place through your phone, and stories given from people who've experienced it. And maybe you have. I don't know, Deki, if you've experienced any fraud over your phone. And this is through just con men. Like one man has given a story how he apparently was sent money into his bank account, then asked to send M-Pesa, and he sent the M-Pesa only to discover that money had actually not hit his account.
Yeah, there are very many, and the thing about this kind of, theft is that it always advances and takes on a new form and mutates into something different. There are some of these things that we are aware of, especially some of these calls and messages that people do receive. But as people advance, it seems like the cybercrime takes a very different shape that sometimes catches people unawares. A particular case in scenario is this one that the person talks about. It's very difficult sometimes for people to be able to know that, they are being cornered and they are being, conned out of some of these things. So it's a very difficult kind of thing. It's a very complex and complicated way. And we need just to be on the lookout more. And the people who are charged with responsibilities, especially the financial institutions, need to be able to put, some firewalls in place so as to be able to secure the people that they serve.
All right, and well, that's where we